Hi, everybody, and welcome to lesson 2 of Fire Edit's How to Write series. So great to be back for week 2. In week 1, we went over what makes a story worth telling, how to write fast, edit slow, the 4 types of writing, and you had a 3-minute writing prompt, your very first one. So now we're going to kick it up a notch by covering what is arguably some of the hardest aspects of writing, which is nailing the perfect angle, title, and intro. These 3 elements really determine pretty much everything about your writing. So whether or not a piece is strong enough to pitch, whether or not that pitch will get approved, how many people will read it, your bestseller potential. So all of the things. So really nailing the perfect angle, title, and intro is the key. If you want to make writing a lucrative part of your career, you got to get these elements right. So let's dive right in. The very first aspect of today's lesson is nailing the angle. So it doesn't matter what type of writing you're working on, whether it's a personal essay, opinion piece, service article, or even a fiction book, you need to know your whys. So your why you're writing about this topic, why now, and why it matters. Those 3 things make up your angle. So say your writing prompt last week, if you touched on feelings of burnout, say, burnout's been covered a million times in a million different ways. So what's going to make your writing about burnout unique, timely, relevant, and relatable? That's going to determine a unique angle that is just yours. That would be enticing to, let's say, a magazine editor or a digital site publisher who would want to publish your work. So there's a few ways and a checklist to actually make sure that you have a good angle for your writing. And the checklist goes like this. So first, it needs to be specific. So your writing has a clear and defined focus that's instantly understandable. Next, it's fresh, so it offers a new perspective or a distinct experience. Next, it's relevant, right? So it applies to a wide audience of what they care about. It's timely, so it has urgency and is rooted in the here and now, whether that's through current news or trends. And it's useful, so it provides the reader with an actionable takeaway, whether that's advice or an emotion that they didn't feel before they read your piece, stuff like that. So editors like me at digital sites, at newspapers, magazines, book publishers, we're constantly on the lookout for great angles. That's how we accept or reject pitches, right? So if your angle really hits on a nerve for our audience, it feels really like, oh my God, this is happening now. This is revelatory. We can't pass this story pitch up. That's going to be the difference between accepting a pitch and rejecting a pitch. And if that's your goal within this masterclass, then nailing your angle is vital. So make sure you read the rest of the post below, because I have some secret questions that I have used to test the strength of my own story angles when I've been working at magazines or digital sites. And then I pass these on to other writers, freelancers, staffers who I've worked with that really help you perfect your angle. So next up is nailing the title. So titles are massively important in writing and the publishing industry. Headlines sell newspapers, cover lines sell magazines, titles sell books. They all come from the same secret sauce, but of course, depending on the platform or the paper versus digital, headlines, titles are going to be slightly different. So what works online may not work on a newsstand, but some of the elements are basically the same. So for instance, at Cosmo and Women's Health, 2 magazines that I used to work with, our cover line meetings were the most important meetings of the month and of the issue. We had to perfect these once we knew the story lineups for the issue. So the story angles were all set and everything, but then it was like, okay, how do we convey what this story is about within seconds that somebody can see and read on the newsstand? Like, oh my God, yes, I have to buy that issue. It needed to be the perfect mix of like enticing and sexy and funny and relatable for our audience. It had to do so many things all at once. So we would sit there for hours and just brainstorm and go delirious trying to come up with the perfect cover lines. But at the end of the day, in essence, those cover lines are what sold the issues. And that's why they're so important. And the same can be said for newspapers, obviously, for digital sites. Whether or not someone clicks into that story is vital, because that's page views, which equal ad revenue. So headlines, super important. And then obviously when it comes to books, yes, the title of your book, it could be snarky or mysterious or fun or really useful, but it's got to grab people instantly. So knowing some of this behind the scenes will really help you when you're crafting a title. The audience and the publication matters a ton, but there are some universal truths and some universal rules about titles in general that is helpful to follow. So rule number 1 is to speak to the reader. So unless it's a personal essay or journal entry that doesn't need a title, Everything else you want to address who you're speaking to. So that's the reader. And you could do that by using the word you. Two, you want to make every single word count. So selecting really impactful and powerful adjectives like delicious, brutal, underrated, and active verbs like discovered, survived, destroyed. Those help do the heavy lifting for you. Three, you want to ignite the audience's curiosity. So whether that's by making an irresistible promise that will improve their life, or tug at their emotions, or shock them, or ask a really intriguing question that they're like, yeah, I've always wondered that too. That's a great way to pull readers in. Number four, you want to emphasize the urgency of the story. So this is something that's happening right now, or a change that they can make starting today, or some new great product or thing that's happening next month. You really want to root it in a given time frame. And then five, you want to keep it tight and short, especially book titles and magazine cover lines. They need to be short. It's a matter of words. A lot of things that help and useful tools are using numbers. You'll see that on digital headlines all the time. Numbered lists really work well. You can also use specific figures or stats in your headline. And then you want to cut filler words. So any word that's not doing heavy lifting, get it out of there. And basically aim for 8 to 12 words total. But obviously that differs depending on your platform. And then finally, ask yourself, once you come up with a great title, would you want to read this story? I feel like that's the end all be all question. Does it pique your curiosity? And if it doesn't, then you've got to go back to the drawing board. Okay, finally, the third part of this lesson is nailing the perfect intro. So introductions are so hard. I don't care where I've worked, whether it's in print magazines or digital media. I've come across writers who are well into their careers who still struggle with introductions. And they are so hard because you have to do so much in such a small amount of space. It's different for books. Obviously, those go by chapters or sections, and you could take your time with it. But for the average service article or personal essay or opinion piece, you've really got to nail the introduction. So back in the day, before even I went to college, I took a summer journalism class at the University of Michigan, and it was there that I was first introduced to the nut graph. So the nut graph is a really popular tool that's used, especially in news writing, that it's a paragraph that clearly identifies the who, what, when, where, and why of a story. It gets to the key details first, and this is really vital to set up any type of story. So there's two ways in which you can get to your nut graph. There's a summary lead and a feature lead. So a summary lead is really straight to the point. It doesn't waste any time teeing up that nut graph. It's all about facts first and then emotions later. So it could be a definite one-liner before getting into the who, what, when, where, why. Whereas a feature lead, this is often called a delayed or anecdotal lead that much more sets the scene for the reader. So whether it's like dropping you straight into a conversation between the author and the person they're interviewing, say, like if it's an interview, or it's giving you a vivid description of the scene or an emotional anecdote, like a mini story or a question that kind of gets the reader's wheels turning. It takes its time. It's much more of an emotional pull on the human level before revealing who, what, when, where, why in that graph. So those are basically the two standard ways in. There are other ways in that you can experiment with, but they all have some things in common, and it's by following these steps to write a great intro. So first and foremost, you want to start with a grabby hook. So whether that's leading with a surprising fact or stat or making a bold statement, or a contradiction, or again, setting a scene that really hooks you, that's key. Two is establishing the stakes. So you're setting up the problem, risk, or dilemma that's going to tee up, why this story, why now? Part of that is step three, which is making the angle clear. So again, clearly laying out the focus of the piece and grounding it in the context of a larger theme, trend, something that's happening now. And then four, you want to list the facts. Again, this is getting back to your nut graph. So the who, what, when, where, why in a clear, distinct, understandable way. Five, getting to the point is crucial in an intro. You don't want it to drag on too long, which is called burying the lead, where readers can start to get distracted, uninterested. You don't want to leave them hanging for too long. So if you're making a promise of what the reader is going to get out by reading your piece of writing, do it early. And then finally, six is avoiding cliches. So cliches, bad puns, corny jokes. If you're leading your piece of writing off with that stuff, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the piece, and people may stop reading. So you don't want that. So in general, a great intro will be about 3 to 6 paragraphs, but again, this is different based on the type of writing and the platform. An intro on digital is going to be about 1 to 2 paragraphs, so very short. A book intro could be several chapters. So once you understand the nailing of the angle, the nailing of the title, and the nailing of the intro, you will really be left with a strong piece of writing, or at least the strong beginnings of a piece of writing that you should be really excited about. So to do this at home this week, here is your writing prompt number 2. So what I would like you to do is pick a juicy or messy idea that's been rattling around in your head lately, something that you've wanted to write about but haven't figured out exactly where to start, or something that is really on your mind that you feel like you need to dig deeper and explore. So first, I want you to write down 3 possible angles for the piece using those rules and the checklist above. Then I would like you to draft 3 potential titles. One can be emotional, one can be curious, one can be super direct. Have fun with it. And then 3, you can write 1 strong opening paragraph that hooks the reader about this topic, clearly explains your angle, and sets up, again, what the reader can expect by reading the rest of the piece. I have some tips down below about how you can use AI to help you in some of these steps. I think it is a very modern way for the average writer to get help with brainstorming. Don't fear it. Don't write everything on AI. That's not what the goal is here. But it is and can be a useful tool in these early stages of brainstorming help, really crafting the perfect angle, making sure that there's evidence or studies or recent news or context to support your theory. Making sure that you can tailor it to a specific audience. So say if you want to pitch Women's Health or Cosmo, learning exactly what their target demographic is. And then headlines, it's really actually a great tool to come up with endless headlines and then go deeper and deeper at each step to really nail the perfect wording. So yeah, I can't wait to see what your writing prompt number 2 leaves you with. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. You can DM me, reply to this email. And then I'll also remind you on Thursday, we can do a Q&A again in our subscriber chat. But I'm here for you, and I hope you enjoyed lesson 2 of how to write. Thanks.